Today, why you probably shouldn't be listening to this podcast right now, and how to overcome the procrastination of consumption. Because when you rolled out of bed this morning, you probably already knew what you needed to do. But you might just be fishing for somebody to help you find something more interesting that maybe feels a little easier. Also today, how to decide when it's time to pull the plug, how to build a firm that is more client-focused, like how to manage the headspace of your entire firm, and how to make accounting cool for the youths. We figured it out. I got a surefire way to get all the kids to want to do accounting. Come on in. It's going to be a big day. It's a Q&A Friday. I'm Jason Daly. My favorite day of the week on this podcast is Friday, doing Q&As, because people ask really smart questions. It gets into the meat of the nuance, which I think is the value of this podcast. We have enough content from our software vendors that is way up here and is a little tone deaf to just the ins and outs of what this stuff looks like, doing it every single day. I think that's the fun of this podcast, getting into the meaty stuff. That being said, so many of our questions, and I'm 100% guilty of this too, so many of our questions are procrastination. It is almost an art form to think of one more question or one more way to analyze, okay, I think I'm going to go do this thing, but what about this? In fact, in corporate settings and in business, oftentimes this is praised oh, you have, that is a really smart question, a really smart consideration. But the trap here is we do this until the end of time. I did this rant a couple weeks ago, but I am just so convicted that society is dividing into creators and consumers. And the future of media seems to all be going online. You've got traditional TV and stuff like that just in the tank. Just about everybody spends their idle moments scrolling. All the youths do this as well. And regardless of what you think of this, the way we consume, the way we learn and all that, it's going online, which means you're going to be on one side of that equation or the other. And man, I don't want to be on the consumer side. I consume for sure, but I want to be on the creator side. And the more we think and we plan and we try to 200 IQ every little decision that we make, the less we're optimizing just for repetition, for the fact that all that really matters is how do I get to the 100th version of this thing as quickly as I can? That's what we should optimize for. You probably heard the analogy of the students making pots. One class they said, and I don't even know what the actual version of this is now, but one class they basically said you'll spend say a month working on a single pot. You make one pot as great as you can. And the other class, they spend an entire month making as many pots as you can basically, and you'll pick your best one. And the class that made as many pots as they can, they made much better pots because it's all about repetition and how do you design a system that will make that thing a habit and eliminate the blockers to sit down and do the thing. That is what leads to getting better at something. And grown-ups, I think one thing that can be a blocker for us is when we're children, and if you're exposed to athletics like I was, so much of success when you are a child is the natural abilities that you're given. That you are born with or that your upbringing has exposed you to. And it is when you're little, that is a very short time horizon to change the hand that you were dealt. So it still makes a difference for sure. But that window of your life from when you're 20 years old and younger is a much shorter time horizon than when you're old, like me, from when you're 20 to 80. Playing the long game, adulting, is about what are you deciding to invest your time in. That is such a longer time horizon where our natural abilities are not behind the wheel to the degree that we may think. Certainly not to the degree that they were when we were younger. And so we decide what we're going to spend our time on. And oftentimes those decisions come from the things that we're consuming and kind of how we're being programmed to have opinions about this and that, because we're absolutely all programmed by the things that we consume. But when all we do is think about it and plan and overanalyze, and this is a very accountant thing to do, then it misses the point. There is no point in all that consumption. There is no point in finding that really smart person that will give you that great new idea if you never do it, right? So how can we be more biased to action? I wrote a post, and as I'm recording this, I don't even know if it'll be out by the time this podcast goes out, but I wanted to play it for you as it was a great illustration to me. It's just like a little LinkedIn post. It's a great illustration to me of the value of doing the thing of just starting and not over analyzing until the end of time. Actually, big day. This is the premiere of a voice model that was trained on my own voice. You know how we do the silly voices of like different characters that we have on the pod? This is a voice model that was trained on me talking on the podcast. It's going to read this little blog post for us here. It's like 500 words or something like that. By the way, super quick and easy with a tool called 11 Labs to train a voice model of yourself talking. Okay, here's that post I wrote, as read to you by Jason AI. Common business wisdom hasn't adapted to the fact that in 2024, the majority of adults spend nearly all their idle moments scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Like it or not, it's where people read, learn, and increasingly make buying decisions. So we should all drop what we're doing and become influencers, right? Have something specific to say about a pain you solve, close your eyes, and let the algorithm make your dreams come true. IMO, being active on social, is a near imperative for professional folk these days, but not for the reasons you may think. While the vast majority of people lurk, engaging is the minimum to simply exist online. When you leave the house, you have conversations, you meet people, you make the occasional connection. When you scroll social media, when you post, when you reply, when you repost with your thoughts, you start conversations, you meet people, you make the occasional connection. If you never left the house, you buy.
Oh my gosh.
What's happening? And make connections. We have a name for these people. Hermits. The opportunities life presents to hermits are limited. If you never post, if you only lurk. If you're a digital hermit, the opportunities life presents to you will be limited. Consider the amount of time people spend online versus being out and about. Consider the specificity algorithms allow for finding people with similar interests. And consider the track of two professionals. One who is consistently visible online and one who is not. One makes a new connection each week, a specific connection. The other just lurks. If you're a good person, be visible, be helpful, be consistent. You'd be amazed how far it'll take you.
I got a lot of thoughts. That was a roller coaster ride. Feels a touch nasally. The problem is I'm increasingly realizing when people hear themselves, like they see pictures of themselves, AI makes images of themselves, it's actually accurate and we just don't like what it's telling us. I don't sound like that. Anyways, had a complete stroke in the middle there. I'm not sure what happened. But the whole thrust, hard to say. The whole point of that post is like, okay, if you never leave the house, people call you a hermit. And if you never leave the house, you don't make connections with people, you don't meet new folks, you don't make new relationships. Compare the time people spend being citizens of the internet versus being out and about in the town square. If you never post, never engage, never say a word online, you are like a digital hermit. And just like how leaving the house will never lead to any interesting connections, never having a conversation online will never lead to any interesting connections, right? Particularly when social media can take you down rabbit holes and find you very specific groups of people, a very way more focused group than just walking outside will get you. But if we are too stuck on, well, I don't know what to post, I don't have anything to say. I just bought I bought a course from Justin Welsh that's going to help me. It's going to help me figure out how to post on social media. Man, that completely misses the point. The point is just to be visible, to be engaged, to be part of the action. Especially if you're already there scrolling. Like most of us are spending all this time consuming, but not engaging. And the more visible we are, the more consistent we are, the more reps we get in, the more we stand to benefit by just being there, by just playing the game. But there's so many forms of procrastination when it comes to consumption. Today's episode is sponsored in part by Team Up. How do you hire people that aren't mediocre? How do you avoid just attracting the middle of that normal distribution, right? We want exceptional people. Well, the answer is recruiting. Is framing your firm and your role as, here's what we do. We have something to say, we're opinionated on the right way to do this stuff and being specific enough to attract an exceptional person who that specific role resonates with. And it is easier said than done. And not unlike how we can attract very general clients, if we don't get specific about this and we don't do the work of recruiting, you can end up with generic results. Not to be mean about this or inhuman, but without putting in the effort,
it's just going to be less likely that you find those exceptional people, right? Just how many people should you be going through? According to TeamUp, you ought to be looking at inviting between 200 and 300 people to apply, getting between 50 and 75 completed applications, getting between 10 and 20 people to complete kind of an introductory test, like establishing a technical bar, do 5 to 10 interviews, and end up with 2 to 3 fantastic candidates. Sound like a lot of work? It is. And that's why partnering with somebody to help you with this will actually increase the likelihood that you get really high quality hires. So team up, they'll help you find really talented accountants in the Philippines, not just like pulling in whoever's walking by, but like doing outbound. Like they have a team of recruiters that are putting a bunch of legwork into this to increase the likelihood that you actually get really, really good people. Learn more about Team Up. Check out a link down in the show notes. Today's episode is sponsored in part by LifeFlow. Why run a big old fancy reporting suite when a spreadsheet will do? Arguably, the spreadsheet is your natural habitat. No need to learn a new platform to get a PhD in how to use some big new FP&A complicated thing when you can just plug your accounting ledger data straight into a spreadsheet. And if you've ever actually pushed reporting on clients, maybe your experience is different. I can tell you in my experience, it is enough of a fist fight to just get them to open the email to look at an attached PDF, let alone like train them on a whole new platform, get them logging into a different place. But a spreadsheet you can point back to every single month, a spreadsheet they can bookmark, it's got all the information that they need, some that's static, some that updates on an ongoing basis. LifeFlow can do that for you, and it's super quick and easy to set up. Integrates now with QBO, with Xero, with Excel, with Google Sheets. I see you, hipster accountant. Create that little report once and keep it syncing like forever. And you got one place for the client to come back to, a spreadsheet, super easy to understand, to change. Even if it's just like pulling net income across all their different entities, it'll do consolidations. So even if it's like, say, a tax planning thing, we're gonna roll up how much money have they made this year so far, and is that on track with maybe how we projected taxable income would be looking this year? Bunch of different things that you can do with that from the comfort of your own home. A spreadsheet, P.O. Box A1, okay? And if that's your happy place, check out LifeFlow, link in the show notes. I try to, in my content, and I meander from this sometimes, I try to be ruthlessly grounded in what's helpful, to not be the know-it-all that's like, I'm going to stand on this mountaintop and have a new novel thing to say. Rather, I have the flexibility of having a team, of not running a firm, of not having a job, whereas all these people that listen to me, they do. They are very busy. They have these firms. And if one of those people that ran a firm could just stop and put together a huge research project and spend 3 weeks on it, or hire a team to do it, what would they do? And is that something that I could do? Like, that's how I try to focus what I'm doing, is oftentimes do some of the bigger lift things that nobody who's actually running a firm could ever actually sink the time into. So I'm always coming back to like, what is the public good that we could create here? That's not opinionated, really. Like, it's not about me. It's about what could we create that would be really valuable for all. And it got me thinking, like, obviously this is a daily podcast, which at its worst could be a real trap. Like, it's procrastination personified. If all it is just like pumping ideas into your head and you never execute, right? So what is a version of my business that's more built around doing, not procrastination, around execution and around accountability? Tell me what you think about this idea, because I'm actually pretty interested in it. Because most of us, especially if you tune into this for a while, you're not short on ideas. We're usually short on execution. We already know the things that we need to do. How do you build a business that enables accountability? How about this? Basically, a 30-day challenge that is beginning to do that thing that you've been putting off doing. That could be doing video. It could be posting to social media every day. It could be learning AI assistance. What's that thing that you've been researching to death and planning to death and you just need to do? How do I get you to do that for 30 days and do it a little bit better each day? Because that's how you get better at something. You do it every single day. It's not going to be perfect, but you commit to yourself, I'm going to find one thing to improve each day that I do it. And then after 30 days, you have something very real and tangible and valuable to show for it. Because on day 1, you're going to be a lot worse than you're going to be on day 30. That sounds really compelling to me. And I don't there's 100 versions of these 30-day challenges and stuff like that. And I think the problem, they enable a lot of cool things, but the downside to them is there's generally no stakes. There's no accountability. It's just like somebody says, I'm going to participate in this thing, and you do it, and it's kind of a fun community thing. But most of us fall off the wagon. So I'm thinking about a version of this where it's like, how do I help you actually execute on the thing that you want to do. And I'm thinking about 3 different versions of this because there's only going to be so many people that I can help directly, obviously. So I'm thinking about a version of this where I literally give you feedback every single day. You have to make a video, you have to make a social media post, whatever. We have an interface. You share that thing with me. I'm going to give you one small thing you can do better the next day on it. One little suggestion. And there is shared accountability there. You're more likely to turn up because it's happening. That would be paid. You're going to be more likely to do it because it's paid. It's amazing. The most valuable thing about coaching, I think, is that people are dropping a pile of money to get coaching, and that makes them do it. So there's a version of that where I'm supporting you. There could also be a version of that where we coordinate how to get a peer to support you. Maybe that would be like a different peer in the group every single day. Someone else who has some stakes here, who's also going through the process, and they could give you one suggestion every single day. And then probably totally free version. That's like an email journey or something like that, where every day or every weekday, you get an email that is going to be one tip, something you could improve upon. But with that, you're going to miss out on the stakes. You're not paying to be there. There's no other humans involved, so it's much easier to duck out, right? I think about these things as we're, how far are we into this? Almost 18 months into a daily podcast. What you don't want to be is putting out this knowledge gruel that people can just come and consume, but doesn't ultimately take them to a better place. I started this through the lens of accounting could just be a really isolating thing. And there's an element of co-working to this idea of a daily podcast where you can kind of go through this, learn something each day. And that's the best version of that. And hopefully for most, it's not something that actively distracts them from executing on something. But to have the other side, I feel like I'm missing that right now. Where how can I enable transformations for people in really practical, clear ways? Not over this ambiguous timeline, but this is what it's going to be. You need to do this. Let's do it. I'm interested in that idea. If you've seen examples of that have worked really well, I would love to see them. I don't know 100% if it's ultimately a thing that we'll do, but I would push you even if it's, a peer that you have who's thinking about doing this thing. How could you commit to yourselves to do this? And how can you add stakes to it? You got to pay the other person $10 every day that you don't do it or something like that. That has a really big impact on our psyche, whether it should or not. Stakes just make a really big difference. And all of this brainstorming and the big ideas and all that stuff, what we ultimately learn from those things is what has to come from execution, not from just thinking about it or talking about it, but actually doing it. Okay, a couple other things, because it's a Q&A Friday. This one's kind of a conglomeration of a couple questions and some discussion that's been on social media. Oftentimes, also watching Eurovision Song Contest recently on Netflix. Fantastic Will Ferrell movie. So good. So stupid. That's where the Yaya Ding Dong meme came from, if you remember that a year or two ago. There's just a guy shouting, "Play more Yaya Ding Dong." That was all that he wanted from their band, was them to just play this one song. It's the only thing he had an interest in. The people in the band were not passionate about it. They wanted to go do new things, but the audience just wanted them to do that one thing. And oftentimes, we set up our accounting firms to just sell Yaya Ding Dong, when that can actually be our constraint. So if you're on a tax practice and you're hiring a tax manager, which one isn't, right? If you are bottlenecked on technical tax work, the solution to that problem is not taking on more tax clients, right? It's something else. It's figuring out how to de-skill the work. It's figuring out how to add adjacent work. This was a massive constraint in my firm, and it's one of the reasons why we decided to launch a CAS practice alongside the tax practice. Is it was way easier for me to hire people to staff a CAS practice when we couldn't find any more tax people. And so we wanted to keep growing, keep doing more things, supporting clients in more ways. And the answer in our case, it was not the thing that was our constraint. And this has always been my primary objection with selling traditional advisory like VCFO. VCFO is very hard to find people to staff, but also very hard to find people who will stay with you, because they could get 5 clients and go off, and why would they not just do their own thing? That's a very, very hard business to build and maintain, because your constraint is people who can do that work really, really well. So stop selling the stuff that you can't staff. In our CAS practice, I've talked about how bill pay and cash planning became really profitable services for us, because when I started hiring in the Philippines, I had people who were perfectly happy to sit there and do accounts payable processing for years on end. And I would never in a million years, at least not in my experience, find an onshore person who would be fulfilled by that and enjoy that as a career. And they were the main breadwinner in their family, hiring somebody onshore, that just wasn't possible. So when we made that sort of unlock, we're we got to sell more bill pay, because this is actually pretty profitable for us and it's easy to staff. And so then that became something that we would try to cross-sell clients into. Not go pick up one more tax client, rather cross-sell into the thing that we could sell more of. And so be thinking about in your service mix, as you're making decisions around what do you want to sell more of, what do you want to sell less of next year, because frankly, the best time to upsell and cross-sell people is in the year-end renewal. So like we ought to be starting to think about how we strategically approach those year-end renewals. My biggest source of growth every single year was not new clients. We would have 10+% growth. It was about a $5 million practice. We'd have easily over 10% growth in new clients every single year. But even bigger than that was growth from existing clients by strategically upselling them and cross-selling them on new stuff and renewals. As we're thinking about how we're going to do that coming into year end, what we don't need to be doing is selling more of the thing that is the constraint, that is the bottleneck, particularly if it is you, if you're selling you. In fact, you almost never want to sell more of yourself. And that just generally feels like good life advice in a lot of ways, you know? This episode is sponsored in part by TruePrep. If you are a tax pro, you know that your tax software, I'm talking US Tax Pro, your tax software is a treasure trove of valuable information. If only we could pull helpful things from it. But whatever your platform calls it, data mining, like whatever your version of that is, where you can like mass export information, it is just about the clunkiest thing you could possibly imagine, which means we've never had an easy way to access all the data that is within our clients' tax returns, which is so frustrating if you think about that. Who else is going to like do useful things with that data when you are the only one that has it? Like you're supposed to be the pro with the tools to glean insights from that stuff, yet it's like stuck in these awful systems. Well, great news! Today's sponsor, TruePrep. They've built I don't know. The simplest way I can frame it is like ChatGPT for tax pros. Basically, you put your client tax returns into the system. It extracts umpteen different figures from those tax returns, and then with an AI assistant, you can chat and say things like, show me all of my Schedule C clients that had over 100K in self-employment income last year. There was a lot of problems with that statement. Let's say then over 100K in Schedule C income. My clients who had over 10K in federal tax penalties. All of my clients who filed in Montana. Just being able to, with a single query, get a bunch of that stuff, oh my gosh. And there's part of me that's like, well, how do we even use this? Because it's not a thing that's really existed in a helpful form. You could do it, but it was so much work that we just never did. TruePrep's building some really cool stuff here. And it's backed with like actual authoritative literature from tax agencies as well. So you can throw some questions at it and it will give you a response with citations. So client sends you a question. If you need some help answering it, even if you just need like quicker access to citations for the answer you may know, you chuck that question in there. It's gonna answer it, give you some resources, save you a bit of time there as well. Pretty cool. Man, people actually doing meaningful things with AI to support tax pros. Imagine that. What a time to be alive. We've done a sponsored demo day for TruePrep on my YouTube channel as well. Check out how that works. We talk through security practices, what you need to be thinking about with tools like this there as well. And that's TruePrep. Learn more, check out the link down in the show notes. Today's episode, sponsored in part by CoreV. I can tell you when it came to selling tax planning, as we called it, back in my day, it wasn't tax advisory. When it came to selling that to clients, the tools that I had to do that work was just a regular plain old tax software, or BNA, which is just the most visually painful program you've ever used. And to present that to a client, to be like, look at this smart stuff I've done, I couldn't get my head around that. I think most of us can't. CoreV, on the other hand, super good at this. It's basically, they have like, they say over 1,500 tax strategies. So they will help you identify strategies for clients. But even as you hear that, if you're a taxpayer, you're like, what's a strategy? Do I really trust that? Here's the thing, is unless we dress it up, unless we can call those things out that we are capturing for our clients, then they don't know the value we are realizing for them. And it may be table stakes for you, but does the client know that? They sure don't. And if you never tell them that thing that you did for them, they're not gonna value you. But I know, virtue signaling, I'm not gonna spend a bunch of time beating my chest about the helpful things I did. Honestly, that's what CoreV's great for. Tax advisory visualizations that show all the things you've done for them, how much money you saved them, even rolling year-over-year savings, stuff as simple as entity selection, simple is not the right word, but down to like where you're setting reasonable comp, retirement contributions, all sorts of different things you can do, Augusta rule, visualizing all those savings in one place. Because your tax advisory work, gang, it ought to be the best paying work in your tax firm. I did this mental exercise on the pod the other day, I think. Say you got a $1,000 a year tax client, and all you do is tax prep for them. If we can get that same client to pay us another $2,000 for tax advisory, so they pay us $3,000 a year, that tax advisory shouldn't be any more work than the tax prep itself. And if we can get clients onto that higher package, let's say we've got the same costs in the advisory work that we do in the tax prep work. Say you're running tax prep at 50% margin. That's $1,000 in costs, $3,000 top line. That's $2,000 profit now. You doubled the amount of work that client is, but we 4x the profit while 2xing the work. So effectively, for time put in, we're making 2x the money. And for every one of those clients you get on that plan, man, you can cut one, or you can go home to bed, take a nap midday, and never go back to work. For tax firms, I genuinely believe like tax advisory is the path to that, to more freedom. Core V, really helpful way to visualize that stuff. We actually did a demo day on the YouTube channel for them recently, so you can see how it works in like 5 minutes. Learn more about them, check out the link down in the show notes. Building on an episode we did the other day a bit, just the note that your firm's attention is ultimately going to be consumed by the things that the people in your firm work on. If everyone in your firm does the work, they will be 100% focused on workflow. I experienced this in our tax practice where we built a CAS practice. My tax practice was a traditional firm in person in an office. My CAS practice, I built remote from day one. So that entire team was remote. I have a lot of blockers and problems with hybrid teams. I think it's really hard to make a team feel balanced if some members of that team are in office and some are remote. In our case, we had a clear departmental divide where everyone for one type of work was remote and the other was in office. And it worked, but it still had issues. Because as far as the people in the office were concerned, the only dog food we sold was tax work. All they cared about in the business was what they did, was the work that they did. Same on the CAS side. Like, they're not thinking about tax stuff. All they're worried about is the things that they're consumed with. And you also see this with, traditional partners, with managers, the people doing the client work. That's what's going to take up all those brain cells. That's what's going to get their attention because it's what they work on. And so if you have something that you want your firm to be better at, or if you want your firm to be thinking about, it's not realistic to expect them to be improving in these ways if it's not part of their job, if it's not something that they work on. And I actually think this might be the best argument for client success managers, for dedicated client-facing staff. And we talked about what Amazon does, where they have kind of this notion of an empty chair in the meeting that's representative of the customer who's not there anytime they have a meeting. Your firm doesn't have any version of that. And without a sort of customer relationship manager role within your firm, who is thinking about that even? Nobody is. You're also focused on workflows. We're like, man, what's the better tool to help me get this thing done a little bit faster and a little more painlessly? And that is a super important thing, because it's ultimately about how the sausage gets made. But if you truly want to have a client-centric firm, it has to be somebody's job, or at least part of their job, because what your firm will collectively focus on is the work that they are doing. And if we have all these platitudes and we give lip service to these other things that we work on and we want to invest on, but then it's nobody's job, it's not going to go anywhere. You're not going to move the ball. Okay, last thing. I don't want to diminish the really important work that people do on the pipeline, on bringing people into the accounting profession. But we had a conversation on social media, and I don't dig into this stuff because people are super, super opinionated on the 150 hour and the pipeline and all these things. But let's make all those people mad right now. Logan had a tweet. I want to be a tax professional when I grow up. Said no kid ever. Let's change that. And I got kids. I got a 3, a 5, and a 7-year-old. They're pretty cool. But you know what I don't tell them? Someday you might grow up and be a tax professional. Because the world that I want them to live in, I hope that somebody doesn't have to do the things that tax professionals have to do right now, right? Tax professionals are amazing and they are so important and tremendously creative, and there's a lot of really cool things that can come from it. But would we rather convince children that being a tax professional is cool, or would we rather advocate for the elimination and simplification of the most inane things that we have to do that are fundamentally not cool? Let's eliminate the uncool stuff so that the future of accounting is being an advocate, being an advisor. That's super cool. That's something great to aspire to. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking that a lot of the really frustrating, trivial things that we have to do today because of stupid legislation, because of awful software that doesn't automate what it ought to automate. Let's not fool ourselves into thinking that that's cool because it sucks. That's just not the way that I see it. And again, a lot of really important work going into the pipeline. A lot of amazing tax professionals. I mean, that's if I'm anything, I'm a tax professional. But all the fears around AI and stuff like that, and how software has already enabled regulation to be wildly complex in a way that would not have been possible if we didn't have software. Like, regulation was able to get extreme because software has simplified things. So we've kind of got this arms race of, well, we can do more and more ridiculous stuff with legislation because we can build the software to manage it. If we can all sit here and cheer on AI and be like, whew, how do we make just all these tools way better to simplify the really, really brutal stuff that we're having a hard time dressing up as being cool? Let's aspire to do that, to eliminate and simplify that uncool stuff so that we can get back to doing cool things. When I had a talk at ZeroCon, it was like a fireside chat a few weeks back. One of the things Zero's really pushing right now is mobile development and the future of tech being more mobile. And they were like, what are your thoughts on business owners and accountants working on mobile devices? And I'm like, business owners can totally see it. Accountants, good luck prying them away from their battle stations. Nobody goes into accounting to be like, I want to leave the house. I want to touch grass today. I don't want to sit in front of this spreadsheet. And that's generalization, but most people, they enjoy the accounting work that they do, hustling all that stuff. I do. That's why I got into it. But I would argue it's gone it has gone too far. The state of tax prep right now in the US, I can speak to. Some of the repetitive things we still have to do in month-end closes. What we do more holistically, it is sexy. We enable entrepreneurship, and that is rad. And that is a super, super cool thing. And we take all of this awful stuff and we obfuscate it so that entrepreneurs can do what they do. And we can handle just all that trash that they would not want to have to navigate themselves and couldn't. That's amazing. But to say that we have to and that's worth framing as cool, because it is cool. But everything that goes into that today, gang, I wouldn't say it's cool. And we're not the only profession that works that way. You hear about people that want to be architects, because that's the idea of that is really cool. But the day-to-day of actually going to work for an architecture firm and being a junior there, it sucks. You want to get into the movie business. The notion of going to film school and being lucky enough to become a junior editor on some big project. That is sitting in a dark room and doing absolute grunt work for months and months and months on end. Not very sexy. So we are not the only profession that is like this. But I would pump, personally, more of my energies into evolving the things that the profession does rather than trying to dress up what it is. And that's my take. I actually think AI could make accounting way better. If we can make it more about enabling folks, even and we have the IRS advocate, but even just the reframing of a tax professional to an advocate, that's such a cooler framing to me of we're partnering with businesses to advocate for them when they run into issues with the tax system, just something geared more that way. I hope the future looks more like that, right? That's all I got. Keep those questions coming. As much as I hated on questions today, saying they're procrastination, sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. We have some cool discussions. Keep those questions coming down in the comments. If you're on the podcast feed, come and check out a YouTube once a week, because there's all sorts of good conversations going down under the video where you don't get it on the podcast. That's it for today. I'll see you in the next one.